In the autumn of 1895, in a small machine shop at 406 Market Street in San Francisco, a 33-year-old Bavarian-born mechanic named Charles August Fey finished assembling a cast-iron device that weighed approximately 100 pounds. The machine had 3 vertical reels, 5 painted symbols on each reel, a horseshoe, a diamond, a spade, a heart and a cracked Liberty Bell, and a single side lever that, when pulled, set the reels spinning. Fey called it the Liberty Bell. He installed the first prototype in a saloon a few blocks from his workshop and went home to wait. Within 6 weeks, every saloon in San Francisco that could afford one was demanding a machine. By the end of 1896, Fey had quit his day job at the California Electric Works and was building Liberty Bells full-time. By 1898, he was wealthy. By 1905, the device had spread to every state in the Union under 100 different names and at least a dozen near-identical mechanical copies. By 1910, it had triggered the most aggressive wave of anti-gambling legislation in American history, and every machine ever sold during that 15-year run was operating on a single mathematical principle that has not been altered in any meaningful way in the 130 years since. The principle is this: a slot machine is not a game. It is a device engineered around a fixed mathematical extraction rate, and the extraction rate is determined before the player ever touches the lever. The machine cannot lose money in the long run because the machine is not in the long run permitted to lose. The player is statistically guaranteed to lose eventually, with a precision that can be calculated to 4 decimal places. This is the entire engineering achievement. Everything else is decoration. To understand how that decoration evolved from cast-iron horseshoes to flashing digital displays, and how the underlying math went from a Bavarian mechanic's intuition in a San Francisco workshop to a $40 billion American industry, you have to walk forward through 6 distinct eras of the slot machine. And the story does not actually start with Fey. It starts 4 years earlier, in a small workshop in Brooklyn, with a card-based device that almost nobody remembers. In 1891, 2 New York mechanics named Sitman and Pitt installed what they called the card machine in a saloon on the Lower East Side. It was a 5-drum device that displayed poker hands. The player inserted a nickel, pulled the lever, and the drums spun 50 playing cards into a randomly arranged poker hand. There was no automatic payout. If the player got a pair, the bartender handed him a free beer. 2 pair, a cigar, a royal flush, sometimes a box of cigars and a round for the house. It was wildly popular within 2 years. The Sitman and Pitt card machine was operating in roughly 1,500 saloons across the East Coast. Every saloon keeper in New York wanted one. The reason it never became the dominant gambling device of the era is the same reason it cannot be called a true slot machine in the modern sense. It had no automated payout mechanism. The drinks and cigars were dispensed by the bartender, which meant the device required human discretion, which meant the device could not stand alone. Charles Fey was a mechanic. He had emigrated from the Bavarian town of Wueringen to America by way of England in the mid-1880s. He had worked in the factories in New Jersey before moving to San Francisco in 1887 to take a job at California Electric Works, where he repaired telephones and intercom systems. He was 33 years old in 1895, and according to the recollections of his family preserved at the Nevada State Museum, deeply impatient with the limitations of the Sitman and Pitt machine, which he had seen in a San Francisco saloon. He understood immediately that the device's commercial ceiling was set by its need for a bartender. His insight was to simplify. He cut the drums down from 5 to 3. He cut the symbols down from 50 playing cards to 5 painted pictures. And critically, he engineered an internal mechanism that would automatically dispense coin payouts for winning combinations, eliminating the bartender from the transaction entirely. The Liberty Bell was the first 3-reel automatic payout slot machine ever built. It is, in direct mechanical lineage, the ancestor of every slot machine currently operating on the floor of every casino in the world. Fey refused to sell or license the design. He built the machines himself in his workshop, leased them to saloons under contract, and took 50% of every machine's weekly revenue as his share. This split, 50 for the operator and 50 for the manufacturer, became the industry standard for the next 60 years. Every American slot manufacturer that came after Fey, Mills, Watling, Jennings, Cahill Brothers, Bally, used some version of his split. The financial structure of the industry was set in cast iron in a single San Francisco workshop in 1896. And now to the math, because everything else in this story sits on top of it. A 3-reel slot machine has a fixed number of symbols per reel. Fey's original Liberty Bell had 10 stops per reel, 5 painted symbols, each appearing twice. 3 reels with 10 stops each yield 1,000 possible combinations. Of those 1,000 combinations, exactly 3 Liberty Bells in a row, paid the maximum jackpot of 10 nickels or 50 cents. The other winning combinations paid smaller amounts. The vast majority of pulls paid nothing at all. Fey did not know the modern academic vocabulary of probability theory. He did not need to. What he understood, by mechanical intuition, is that the relationship between the number of winning combinations, the size of the prizes paid for each winning combination, and the number of total possible outcomes determined exactly how much money the machine would extract from its player base over time. Set the symbol distribution one way, and the machine pays back 90% of what it takes in. Set it the other way, and it pays back 50%. The machine's profitability is, in every meaningful sense, a setting. It is dialed in before the player arrives. The mathematician and gambling historian Edward Thorpe, who would later write the seminal 1962 work on card counting in blackjack, observed in his analysis of mechanical gambling devices that the slot machine is the only casino product where the player has no decisions to make whatsoever. The player puts in a coin. The player pulls the lever. The reels stop. The outcome happens. There's no skill component. There is no strategy. The player is, functionally, a button that triggers a mathematical extraction at a rate the operator has predetermined. This is what makes the title of this video literally true. The slot machine, viewed as a device, mathematically cannot lose. The house edge is built into the architecture of the reels. The only way a slot machine could lose money in the long run would be if every player happened to leave the machine at exactly the moment of their largest cumulative winnings, which, by the law of large numbers, does not happen across millions of pulls. Within a decade of Fey's first installation, the device had multiplied across America, and within 15 years, it had triggered the first nationwide attempt to ban it. In 1909, the city of San Francisco, Fey's own city, banned the operation of slot machines within its limits. Nevada followed in 1910. By 1911, slot machines had been outlawed in roughly half the states in the country. The political pressure came from the same Protestant reform movements that had killed the state lotteries 70 years earlier, the same theological objections, the same accusations of corruption of working-class men, the same predictable response. The slot manufacturers responded with an engineering solution that became, in its way, more brilliant than Fey's original device. They reframed the slot machine as a vending machine. In 1910, a Chicago manufacturer named Herbert Mills, who had been mass-producing slot machine copies of Fey's design under the brand name Mills Novelty Company, redesigned his machines in a way that turned the entire legal landscape inside out. He replaced the playing card and Liberty Bell symbols on the reels with images of fruit, cherries, lemons, oranges, plums. He installed a small chamber on the side of the machine that dispensed a stick of chewing gum on every pull, and he registered the machines as gum vendors. The legal fiction was that the symbols on the reels were not gambling indicators, but flavor indicators for the gum being dispensed. A cherry match told you that you had won a piece of cherry-flavored gum. The actual cash payouts that still came out of the machine for matching symbols were, according to the legal filings, an unrelated bonus feature. The gum was the product. The gambling was incidental. This was nonsense. Everyone involved understood it was nonsense. But it was nonsense that survived legal challenges in dozens of state courts for the next 2 decades. The Bell Fruit Gum Company, founded specifically to manufacture the chewing gum that the slot machines dispensed, gave the industry the bar symbol that appears on slot machine reels to this day. It was originally a stylized Bell Fruit Gum logo, the cherry symbol, the lemon symbol, the orange symbol. All of them survived from the 1910 reframing. The modern slot machine inherited its visual vocabulary directly from a Prohibition-era legal dodge. By the 1920s, the slot machine had been driven out of legitimate public space in most of the country and into a separate parallel economy run by organized crime. The most powerful figure in that economy was a Sicilian-born Manhattan crime boss named Francesco Castiglia, who operated in New York under the name Frank Costello. Beginning in 1928, built what was at the time the largest slot machine empire in the United States. At its peak in the early 1930s, his operation controlled an estimated 25,000 machines installed in candy stores, cigar stands, pharmacies and speakeasies across New York City. The machines were technically illegal. The bribes paid to police precinct captains and city officials to look the other way were systematic. The historian Selwyn Raab, in his work on the 5 families of New York organized crime, documented that Costello's slot operation in this period was generating revenue at a rate that exceeded the city's official liquor tax collections. In 1934, Fiorello LaGuardia became mayor of New York City. LaGuardia had run on an anti-corruption platform. He had specifically named the slot machine as the most visible symbol of the corruption he intended to dismantle. In the spring of 1934, he ordered the New York Police Department to seize every slot machine in the 5 boroughs. 11,278 machines were confiscated over the following months. LaGuardia then organized a public ceremony in October of 1934 in which he personally took a sledgehammer to the first of them on a barge in Long Island Sound. The destruction was filmed for newsreels. Over the following weeks, the remaining machines were dumped into the waters of the Sound. They are, presumably, still down there. Costello, watching his New York operation evaporate, did what any rational businessman would do. He relocated. He shipped his remaining machines to New Orleans, where the governor of Louisiana, Huey Long, had personally negotiated an arrangement that allowed Costello to install thousands of slots across the state in exchange for a defined percentage of the revenue flowing into Long's political organization. The arrangement lasted until Long's assassination in 1935, after which a sustained federal investigation eventually shut Costello's Louisiana operation down. But somewhere in the middle of this, in a state nobody had been paying much attention to, the slot machine quietly became legal again. In March of 1931, the state of Nevada legalized casino gambling. The Depression had emptied the state's treasury. The silver mining industry that Nevada had depended on for 50 years was in collapse. The state legislature, led by an assemblyman named Phil Tobin, passed a bill that re-legalized casino-style gambling under state licensing, including the operation of slot machines. The bill was signed into law by Governor Fred Balzar on the 19th of March, 1931. Nevada was, at that point, the only state in the Union where the slot machine could legally operate. The casinos that emerged in Reno, and later, after Bugsy Siegel's Flamingo opened in 1946 in Las Vegas, became the place where the entire industry consolidated. The mechanical engineering of the device continued to advance throughout the 1940s and 1950s, but the fundamental mathematical architecture that Fey had designed in 1895 remained intact. 3 reels, symbols on each reel, fixed payout schedule, predetermined house edge. The machine cannot lose. And then, in 1963, the industry crossed a line it had never crossed before. A Chicago-based manufacturer called Bally Manufacturing released a machine called Money Honey. It was the first fully electromechanical slot machine ever sold commercially, where every previous slot had used cast iron weights and springs and gears to determine where the reels stopped. Money Honey used electric solenoids and electromechanical relays. The change sounds technical and minor. It was not. It was the most important shift in slot machine architecture in the entire 70 years since Fey had built the Liberty Bell. The reason it mattered is that the mechanical machines had a hard physical limit on the maximum payout they could deliver. The cast iron payout hopper could only hold so many coins. A jackpot larger than the hopper's capacity would jam the machine. Mechanical slots therefore could not, by physical engineering constraint, advertise jackpots above a few $100s. Money Honey, because it used electromechanical relays, could pay out jackpots in the thousands. The jackpot stopped being a function of the size of the coin hopper and started being a function of the size of the casino's bank account. Within 5 years of Money Honey's release, every major casino in Nevada had replaced its mechanical slots with electromechanical machines. The advertised jackpots quintupled. The number of pulls per minute increased because the electromechanical machines were faster than the spring-driven ones. The revenue per machine per hour doubled. And then, in 1976, the first fully electronic, computer-controlled video slot was released by a Las Vegas startup called Fortune Coin Company. Within 2 years, Fortune Coin had been acquired by IGT, International Game Technology, and in 1982, IGT licensed a patent that would do for the slot machine what Fey's original design had done in 1895. Change the underlying mathematics of the device in a way that would not be reversed. If you are finding this useful, hit subscribe. We cover deep histories of everyday money like this every week. The patent was filed in 1979 by a Norwegian-born engineer named Inge Telnes, who had moved to the United States to work in the gambling industry. The patent, eventually issued in 1984 as US Patent Number 4,448,419, was titled, in characteristically dry technical language, Electronic Gaming Device, utilizing a random number generator for selecting the reel stop positions. The patent disclosed an invention that, on the surface, looked like a minor refinement of existing slot architecture. In practice, it was a complete rewriting of how slot machines work, and it remains the architectural basis of every digital slot machine currently in commercial operation. Here is what the Telnes patent did. In a traditional mechanical slot, the physical reels are the actual probability space of the machine. If a reel has 22 physical stops on it, then any given symbol on that reel has, at most, a 22-to-1 chance of being landed on. The visible reel is the math. The math is the visible reel. They are the same object. Telnes uncoupled them. His patent disclosed a system in which the physical reels visible to the player were no longer the actual probability space of the machine. Instead, an internal random number generator selected outcomes from a virtual reel, a software-defined list of symbol positions that could be hundreds or thousands of entries long. The physical reels then displayed the result by mechanically rotating to whatever position the random number generator had selected. The player still saw a spinning wheel of physical symbols, But the actual odds of any given outcome were no longer determined by what was painted on the reels. They were determined by how the virtual reel had been weighted in software. This sounds technical. The practical implications are not technical. They are devastating. It meant the casino could now advertise enormous jackpots. A single jackpot symbol on the virtual reel might have a 1 in 100,000 probability of being selected, even though the physical reel showed only 22 visible stops. The advertised odds and the actual odds had been severed. The visible math of the machine had become a costume worn over the real math, which was hidden inside a microprocessor that the player would never see. It also meant the casino could engineer near misses with surgical precision. The virtual reel could be weighted so that the symbols adjacent to the jackpot symbol appeared on the visible reel far more often than chance would dictate. The player would see 2 jackpot symbols line up, with the third just barely missing the pay line, again and again, with a frequency that pure randomness would never produce. The Telnay's patent explicitly discussed this capability in its technical description. The near miss was not an accident. It was a designed feature, and the engineering of the near miss connects directly to a body of psychological research that had been waiting for almost 30 years for someone to find a commercial application for it. Between 1957 and 1962, the Harvard psychologist Burrus Frederick Skinner, universally known as B.F. Skinner, had published a series of papers and an enormously influential book titled Schedules of Reinforcement, co-authored with Charles Fey. The book documented Skinner's experimental finding that animals trained to perform a behavior in exchange for a reward responded most persistently and most resistantly to extinction when the reward was delivered on what Skinner called a variable ratio reinforcement schedule. Reward the animal after a fixed number of responses, and the animal will pause after each reward. Reward the animal randomly after an unpredictable number of responses, and the animal will not pause. The animal will continue performing the behavior faster and faster until physical exhaustion. The slot machine is the textbook commercial application of the variable ratio reinforcement schedule. The player is rewarded randomly. The player therefore does not pause. The player continues pressing the button until the player runs out of money or physical capacity. The cultural anthropologist Natasha Dow-Schul, who is now a professor at New York University, spent 15 years conducting fieldwork in the Las Vegas gambling industry, beginning in the 1990s. Her 2012 book, Addiction by Design, is the definitive academic study of how modern slot machines are engineered. Schul documented in detail how the major slot manufacturers, IGT, Aristocrat Leisure, Bally Technologies, employ industrial psychologists, ergonomic designers, and behavioral economists specifically to maximize what the industry internally calls time on device. Time on device is the only metric that matters. Every other variable, sound design, seat ergonomics, button placement, color saturation, jackpot ratio, is calibrated to extend it. Schul also documented what the industry calls losses disguised as wins. A modern slot machine, when a player bets 50 cents and wins 20 cents back, will trigger a celebratory animation, flashing lights, and victorious music. The player has, in fact, lost 30 cents. The machine has been engineered to make the loss feel like a win. The industry calculates that the average modern multi-line slot machine generates losses disguised as wins on approximately 30% of all pulls. The player walks away from a session having lost money on the majority of pulls, having been told by the machine that they were winning on a majority of pulls. These two facts, in the player's memory, fail to reconcile. So now we can complete the math that Fey began in 1895. A modern American casino slot machine is programmed by Nevada Gaming Control Board regulation to return a minimum of 75% of wagered money to the player over the long run. In practice, most machines on most casino floors return between 88 and 95%. The house edge, the amount the machine retains, therefore runs between 5 and 12% of every dollar wagered. That sounds modest. It is not. The reason it is not is that a modern slot machine accepts wagers at a rate of roughly 5 to 10 pulls per minute, for hours at a time, from a single seated player. A player wagering $1 per pull at 6 pulls per minute for 4 hours has wagered $1,440. At a 10% house edge, that player has, mathematically, transferred $144 to the casino shul. Documented sessions where individual players in Las Vegas wagered, in cumulative pull terms, sums in excess of $50,000 over a single 12-hour period. The actual cash outlay was much smaller because most of the wagered money cycled through the machine multiple times. But the house edge worked on every dollar of cumulative wagering. The extraction is relentless because the cycle is relentless. In 2023, the American Gaming Association reported that slot machines accounted for approximately 70% of all casino gambling revenue in the United States. The total American commercial casino industry generated approximately $66 billion in gross gaming revenue that year. Roughly $45 billion of that, more than the combined annual revenue of the National Football League and Major League Baseball combined, came from the descendants of Charles Fey's Liberty Bell. Fey lived to see his invention become the most lucrative gambling device ever engineered. He died in San Francisco in November of 1944 at the age of 82. The original Liberty Bell still exists. It is held at the Liberty Bell Saloon in Reno, Nevada, which was operated for decades by Fey's grandsons. Visitors can walk up to the glass case and look at the cast iron device that, in 1895, set into motion the precise mathematical extraction that, 130 years later, takes $45 billion a year out of the pockets of working Americans. Fey understood, in 1895, that the house edge was a setting. Telnace understood, in 1979, that the visible reals could be uncoupled from the actual math. Skinner had documented, in 1957, that random reinforcement produces compulsion. Schull documented, in 2012, that the industry has industrialized all three insights into a single machine that is now engineered to keep the player seated for as long as physically possible while the extraction runs. The slot machine cannot lose. That has always been true. What has changed is the precision with which the machine can now select which player, over what time frame, will be forced to make up the difference between what the machine takes in and what it pays back. The cast iron has been replaced by silicon. The horseshoes and Liberty Bells have been replaced by digital animations of dolphins and pirates. The bartender that Charles Fey eliminated in 1895 has been replaced by a behavioral psychologist with a doctoral degree, but the mathematical principle remains exactly what Fey set into motion in his San Francisco workshop, a device engineered to extract money on a fixed schedule from a human being seated in front of it. The schedule has been refined to a degree the Bavarian mechanic could not have imagined. The extraction has not changed at all. If this changed how you think about the lights on a casino floor, the video on screen right now goes deeper into another piece of financial history hiding in plain sight.